So this marks the official beginning of my scouting reports of prospects for the 2017 NFL Draft. It's about time we got down to the business at hand, isn't it? It's going to be a fun ride the next 3+ months. So, as is tradition every year, I always start off with the quarterback position because at the end of the day, that is the most important position in North American professional sports, and it's not even close. And when trying to figure out which quarterback I was going to start with, I decided to go with the quarterback that is the most well known in the 2017 NFL draft class, the most widely recognized, the biggest star, the guy with the most big time national exposure, the guy that's going to be the most talked about quarterback in this draft process, and ultimately the quarterback that will be the most hotly debated in the process the next few months leading up to the 2017 draft. And that, of course, is Deshaun Watson. Now, I think everybody's familiar with the resume by now. Deshaun Watson was a highly touted quarterback coming out of high school. Clemson was lucky to get him, and he was supposed to be that dude. He was supposed to be that guy that would ultimately get Clemson over the hump. For many years, Clemson would be that type of program that early on in the year they'd be a top 20, top 15, top 10, top 5 rated program. And you always felt like at some point in time, reality would set in. They were overrated. And when it came to a big game, they couldn't win the big game. And that's a fair assessment because that's exactly what that program had been for several years. Get to a certain point, but they couldn't get over the hump. And at the end of the day, Deshaun Watson was supposed to be that guy that was supposed to get them over the hump. And it took a little bit, but he finally got his chance in 2014 as a true freshman. And just as he was starting to really establish himself, of course, that's when he tore his ACL. And mad props to him because coming off of that torn ACL, Deshaun Watson was everything that the Clemson program could have hoped for and so much more. He came back with a vengeance in 2015 and frankly again in 2016. Back-to-back 4,000-yard plus passing seasons. Between passing and rushing touchdowns, he had 97 of them his last 2 seasons in college. He led his team, for a team, mind you, a program in Clemson that struggled to even get in an ACC championship game or get to a big New Year's Day type of bowl. His last 2 years as a starter, he played in the last college football game of the year, the national championship game. That was a program changer for Clemson. Deshaun Watson ultimately ended up being every bit of that dude that he was supposed to be, that difference maker, that franchise program changing guy. And I think he ultimately bore it out in the way he played in the 2 national championship games against Alabama, ultimately leading Clemson to victory a couple of weeks ago with a second to go. Your 2016 national champion Clemson Tigers. So when you look at the numbers and you look at what Deshaun Watson was able to do for that program and in the big spotlight, that's a hell of a resume to have. And it's understandable why a lot of people are really high on Deshaun Watson and firmly believe that he should be a high pick, a first-round pick, and a high first-round pick at that in the 2017 NFL Draft. And while I would love nothing more than to come on here and say that that should be the truth or that's the way I see it, there's just far more to the story. And I think when it comes to Watson, that's ultimately what it's going to be about. When you're grading quarterbacks in general, sometimes it could just be about perspective. It could be about what an organization values in certain traits compared to other traits. And that can ultimately dictate where that particular player is valued. I think that's what it's going to come down to with Deshaun Watson. Because there are certain things that you just can't measure, but they produce very tangible, real results. His are off the charts. By far the best of any quarterback in the 2017 draft. But he has some flaws, and some major significant flaws that make you wonder what type of starting quarterback he could really be at the NFL level. So let me talk a little bit about his biggest strengths and his biggest weaknesses as a prospect. In terms of his biggest strengths, obviously his mobility and his athleticism. He can throw on the move. He's a guy that can keep plays alive. He can improvise, and he's obviously a threat, a big threat, borderline home run threat every time he runs the football. In today's NFL, you love nothing more to have a quarterback that can extend plays like that and could be that dual threat type of guy. We continue to evolve more and more away from the pocket passers, even though it's funny. You look at Super Bowl 51, it's two pocket passers, two relatively immobile guys, and Tom Brady and Matt Ryan, who have their teams in the Super Bowl. But in general, the theme around the league is it's more and more about being a dual threat, being able to move. And Deshaun Watson has that ability in great abundance. As referenced earlier, I love the kid's intangibles. You can tell. Now, for somebody like me that's a fan that doesn't get the ability to interview Deshaun Watson, talk to his head coach Dabo Swinney, doesn't get to sit there and interview his friends and family, teammates, what have you. Sometimes it can be hard to measure certain things when it comes to leadership and work ethic and so on. Uh, well, Deshaun Watson, it's not because you can see it. It's clearly there. Now, granted, Deshaun Watson did not take this program alone, all by himself, to that next level and make them national champions. But everything that they did as a team that got them to that point started with Deshaun Watson. You could see the guy is a hard worker. You could see the guy is a great leader. You could see the guy has that it factor that makes you believe that he can take you to where you want to go, that he can win in those situations where you think defeat is close at hand. He has that. I look at the guy coming off of a torn ACL, back-to-back 4,000-yard passing seasons, 97 combined touchdown passes in a decent conference like the ACC. I mean, this dude's got some legit intangibles, those things that sometimes you can measure, and really honestly, sometimes you just can't. You have to see it, you have to know it. And if I'm looking at a guy and I want to say that this guy has everything from a mental makeup and a desire makeup, is Deshaun Watson. That's the type of kid that I would want in my locker room. And I also love his clutch factor. Now, sometimes, unfortunately, he played down to the level of his competition, but in those big games, when the spotlight shined the brightest, he really stepped up and he met the challenge. Even the national championship game that they lost to Alabama at the end of that 2015 season. I mean, he played big. Now you turn around and he plays big again, and this time leads his team to victory over a hell of an Alabama Crimson Tide team. That takes clutch factor. And again, he's got it, and he's got it in great abundance. And you like quarterbacks that have that kind of captain comeback, put the team on their back, and I'll take you to the promised land type of feeling to him. And Deshaun Watson has that. And that's a huge strength. So you could talk about things like arm strength and accuracy and things like that. But with the intangibles that he has, the clutch factor that he has, sometimes guys can just find a way to get it done. And Deshaun Watson, I think, in the NFL, especially early on in his career, it might not always be pretty, but there will be points in time where he could potentially be that dude that can find a way to get things done. Now, it's not going to be easy for him because, like I said, there are several critical, crucial question marks that really give me pause on Deshaun Watson as a prospect. First, his accuracy and ball placement stinks. There is no other way to put it. It stinks. Part of the reason his numbers are so good was because of some of the talent he had in the passing game, especially in 2016 with Mike Williams and Jordan Leggett and Renfro to a lesser degree as well. You had Gallman in the running game. I mean, this was a legit Clemson offense with multiple NFL weapons. And while the numbers don't always reflect it, it's because of the playmakers that he played with. They made him look better than he really was in this area. I mean, there's times where he's 5 yards short or 10 yards over the guy's head. There's times where he needs to throw the ball leading the receiver and the ball's way behind. And this is not just an occasional thing. It's not just a once in a while thing. This is a consistent pattern and trend across the board. Standing in the pocket, rolling to the left, rolling to the right, doesn't matter. Clean pocket, pressure in his face, Trying to go to the hot read doesn't matter. Accuracy, ball placement are significant concerns. And when you're talking about a guy being able to be a starting quarterback at the NFL level and you want to be able to beat teams as a pocket passer, it's one of the last traits that you want to be a major weakness. And with Deshaun Watson, it is a major weakness. Another major weakness that I see is his field vision. I don't know what happened in 2016 compared to 2015. I frankly feel like Deshaun Watson impressed me more as a prospect then than he did this past season. Now, maybe some of that was the fact that he didn't have to go through a lot of progressions. He didn't have to make a lot of reads because he's such a great athlete that if his initial read isn't there or the rush gets in his face, he could just scramble out and get the first down or make a big play happen anyways. And that could be part of it. But in the NFL, if Deshaun Watson of 2016 tries to play like that in the NFL in 2017 or 2018, 19, and so on and so forth, all the defense is going to have to do to be able to stop this dude and make him look really, really bad is say, Deshaun Watson's starting off looking left. I already know he's not coming back to this side of the field. So all I have to do is defend half of the field. And that to me, as much as we could even talk about accuracy and ball placement, at the NFL level, you're dealing with a lot of guys that have tremendous catch radiuses. They can adjust and come back to the ball. They can contort their body, reach over the defenders, do all these things. But you make it way too easy for the defense if you're basically cutting off half the field. And that's what Deshaun Watson does. If he starts off looking over the middle, this is consistent, especially in 2016. I thought he did a little bit better reading defenses and going through progressions as a sophomore in 2015 than he did this year. I don't know if that was by design with the Clemson offensive system or if he got kind of lazy because of some of the talent he had around him. But this won't cut it at the NFL level, period. Because if he does, he's going to get destroyed. Because if he looks over the middle, you know damn good and well it's going over the middle. He's basically cut the hashes and out of the play. If he looks to the left, anything from center right, don't have to defend. You can roll all of your safeties, roll all of your coverage this way. And this is not hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating. If you actually watch his film, it's true. It's real. It's not just that he locks onto his primary targets on a consistent basis. Is that he only looks at one target on a consistent basis and shuts off an entire side of the field depending on where he's looking. That's too easy for NFL defenses to prepare for. That's too easy for NFL defenders and defensive backs in particular to figure out. He has to be able to develop some type of sense to be able to go through his progressions. Because if you want an example of a guy that had a lot of physical tools, but in large part because of a lack of accuracy and ball placement and a lack of field vision, will never really cut it as a big-time NFL starting quarterback, that's Colin Kaepernick. He's got a rocket arm, even with that long release. He's got a hell of a hose for an arm. You know, good size, great athlete, even better than Deshaun Watson. But his accuracy is terrible on a consistent basis, and he just can't go through his progressions. He can't read defenses. And I'm really concerned that Deshaun Watson can't either. Now, maybe it wasn't a strength, and Dabo Swinney and that coaching staff at Clemson said, hey, instead of trying to work on this weakness, we'll just play to your strengths. We'll accentuate the positives and try to hide or mask the negatives as much as you possibly can. Frankly, it speaks, in my mind, to the lack of quality coaching at the college level that more teams couldn't figure this out, including Nick Saban in Alabama. You watch the film. All you need to tell your defenders to do is look at his eyes in the pocket. Wherever he's looking is where the ball is going. Not hard to figure out. Now, I know a lot of people knock him for his decision making and say that's the biggest thing he needs to work on along with accuracy. To be honest with you, yeah, there are times where he forces the ball. There are times where he should be taking the check down and he doesn't. But I think his field vision is a much bigger problem because it can lead to some of the poor decisions because he has too much confidence in his arm, which is solid in terms of its strength, but it's not elite or exceptional. And he tries to fit the ball in double coverage. Sometimes he'll throw the bomb down the field when you really didn't need to do that. So decision making is a bit of a concern. but I'm much more concerned about his accuracy and ball placement, and in particular, his ability to read defenses and move defenses with his eyes. His field vision absolutely sucks, and that's just the way it is. It's not saying it's something that can't be worked on, can't be improved upon, because it most certainly can. But sometimes that can also be kind of a innate ability, and some guys just can't mentally process fast enough to be able to go through progressions and quickly read and react to what they see. I hope that's not the case with Deshaun Watson, but again, when you watch the film in 2016 in particular, you see this and it's just jumping out at you, just how big of a flaw and a hole it is in his game. Now, when it comes to an NFL comparison, you know, I was thinking of different guys, and I always kept coming back to Dak Prescott. I know you'll see some people that will equate him to Russell Wilson. Wilson's arm's stronger. Wilson's accuracy in general is better, although even in the NFL, still 5 years in, he'll have those games that make you wonder, but he has the ability to make some beautiful touch throws. Russell Wilson can actually read defenses. He can actually go through his progressions, things Deshaun Watson has proven incapable of doing at Clemson. I look at a more realistic comparison being a Dak Prescott. You know, you're talking about a kid coming out of Mississippi State, fourth round pick. You know, in a way was a bit of a franchise guy for Mississippi State, took them to a whole different level. He was a guy, frankly, that I didn't grade as highly as I should have. I missed on him because I focused a little too much on the lack of arm strength and the DUI arrest and some of this other stuff. But not looking at the intangibles, not valuing them enough, and not focusing on some of the things that he did bring to the table, that he was comfortable with being the dude because he had been the dude, and you could see the impact he made being the dude. I see a lot of that in Deshaun Watson's game. And if you put him in a situation where there's a solid to good defense, a running game, an offensive line that can protect him, and maybe a quality receiving option or two, and Deshaun Watson could potentially still start in the league as a rookie and be somewhat effective. He'd be more of a role player, especially early on in his career, but I think he could hack it because of some of those intangibles and the leadership quality, the ability to make plays with his feet as well with his arm, his clutch factor, his ability to rise when the spotlight shines the brightest. I think it's a great comparison for him. Now, in terms of his final grade on my big board, the final score ended up being 80.85, which puts him at a third to fourth round pick, honestly. Now, keep in mind, when I'm doing this grading, this scoring, ranking, however you want to put it, this is a general thing. So some teams, it could make sense to me if they had a late first round grade on Deshaun Watson or an early to mid second round grade on Deshaun Watson. Some other teams that might value other traits might have him as a fifth round pick or a sixth round pick. And again, I get all of that. For where I'm at and what I was grading for and what I was basing it off of, the grade ultimately matched what I saw. I felt like I saw a third to fourth round type of prospect, somewhere that somebody that in theory, based off of talent and where he's at in his game and how much work there is to go, should go somewhere between pick 85 to pick 115. That felt right, which wouldn't be that much higher than where Dak Prescott went in the 2016 draft. That's not to sit there and have me say that I think Deshaun Watson sucks, because I don't. That's not for me to say that he has no chance to make it in the NFL, because I don't believe that. But jumping in right away and being a big star, give me a break. This isn't college, and he's got some major, serious, significant holes and flaws in his game. Period. So it feels right where I've got him graded. In terms of his best NFL fits, I look at a team like the Giants, because there wouldn't necessarily be the pressure to start right away. Kansas City, same thing. I think he could do some very good things long term under Andy Reid and be better than Alex Smith has been long term down the road. The Chicago Bears, with a Jordan Howard in the running game, an improved offensive line, especially in the interior, and a defense that is continuing to get better, that should add some more talent to it. A guy like a Deshaun Watson makes a lot of sense, even with their second round pick, in terms of a guy that you could bring in and you're not asking him to be a star, but you don't want to sit there and have him shoot himself in the foot too much. Now, granted, he did that at Clemson with 17 interceptions, but he also made a lot of big plays too. And sometimes when you have an offense that does what that team's offense does, sometimes you will get some turnovers, some ugly ones at that. Uh, but I think that's something you could potentially cut back on a little bit at the NFL level. I think Cleveland could potentially be a good fit for him. I really think the best fit for him in this draft, based off of some of the parameters that I mentioned, though, was the Buffalo Bills in terms of if he was going to a situation where he would potentially have to play right away. You're going into a situation where you have a great running game with LaShawn McCoy. You've got Sammy Watkins on the outside. You've got a defense that's going to be switching back to a 4-3, which is what it should have been all along. And it seems like a natural type of fit. You bring in Deshaun Watson. If you decide to start him as a rookie, maybe he beats out a Tyrod Taylor, or you move on from a Tyrod Taylor. Deshaun Watson feels like the role-playing type of dude that could make the occasional play, back off on some of the risks that he takes, and maybe lead you to 9 wins. Maybe have you in the wild card race. So again, I think all this talk of Deshaun Watson going in round 1, and in particular early round 1, is ludicrous. I applaud Dabo Swinney for backing his dude, because if I was Dabo Swinney, I'd be doing the same damn thing. I'd be comparing Deshaun Watson to Michael Jordan. I'd be naming my sons and daughters after him. Oh, you have a daughter named Deshaun? Motherfucker, Deshaun Watson won me a national championship. My daughter's going to be named Deshaun if I want her to be. Deshaun Watson Swinney. You're damn right, if I was in his situation, I'd be naming my daughter Deshaun Watson Schlegel. You're damn right about that. But that's why Dabo Swinney's coaching in college and not an NFL scout or a front office executive, a general manager. Because to sit there and say he should be the number 1 overall pick in the draft based off of where his game is and the significant holes he has in his game is just absolutely ludicrous. Ludicrous. I think a team taking Deshaun Watson in the top 5 in this draft would be ludicrous. The earliest a guy like a Deshaun Watson I could justify or potentially understand or even defend him being taken is once you start getting to New York's pick and afterwards, whether it's one of those teams like New York or Kansas City at the tail end of round 1, or maybe a team in the early portion of round 2 like Cleveland, Chicago, Buffalo, they even want to bump up into that late portion of round 1 to get Watson to potentially have that 5th year of a guaranteed salary cap control of their starting quarterback by taking him in round 1, as opposed to at most getting a 4-year rookie contract for him as a 2nd or 3rd round pick. That's the reality of the NFL to me, is that even if I graded a Deshaun Watson as a 3rd to 4th round guy, if I really value certain things about him, the mobility, the intangibles, that clutch factor, frankly, yeah, it'd be great to get a stud in the 2nd round or a 3rd round, but Deshaun Watson could potentially be a bit of a franchise changer, a scene changer for me. Then I'm okay with bumping up and reaching for him at the tail end portion of round 1, because of how important the quarterback position is and how important it would be to have a young quarterback that you can wait several years for from a salary cap standpoint before you have to potentially pay him big money. But in terms of merit, in terms of as an actual prospect, Deshaun Watson in the 1st round, especially high in the 1st round, is craziness, is foolishness. And if that's the way and path we're going to go down, then Deshaun Watson is easily one of the most overrated prospects in the 2017 NFL Draft. Boom.